You ever notice how some people never really argue to understand you? They argue to win. They don't listen to what you're saying, they listen for loopholes, for weak spots, for ways to flip your own words back at you. That's not a debate, that's not even a disagreement, that's a game. And narcissists, they are masters of that game. See, the first thing you need to understand about a narcissist is this: their fuel isn't truth, it's control. They don't care about being right. They care about being in charge of the conversation, the relationship, the room. They want the spotlight on them, and they'll do whatever it takes to keep it there. They'll twist words, shift blame, even rewrite entire memories just to make sure they never look like the one at fault. And here's the trick: they're subtle. Most of the time, you don't even realize it's happening until you're knee-deep in confusion. You walk away from a conversation wondering, wait a second, am I the bad guy here? Did I really say that? Am I losing my mind? That's not you losing it, that's you being played. That's their game. Now, let me break down what that game really looks like. Narcissists survive off what's called manipulation cycles. They start with charm. They put on a mask that makes them look generous, confident, even magnetic. They draw you in. They give compliments, they mirror your behavior, they make you feel seen in ways you haven't felt in a long time. And once they've hooked you, once they've got your trust, that's when the game begins. The rules, they're always changing. One day what you say is fine, the next day it's offensive. Yesterday you were amazing. Today, you're a disappointment. And you're stuck running in circles trying to figure out what version of yourself they'll accept. That's how they control you, by keeping you in constant uncertainty. Another part of their game is gaslighting. And let's call it what it really is: psychological warfare. A narcissist will look you in the eye and tell you the sky isn't blue even when you're staring right at it. They'll deny things they said, they'll act like your memory is broken, and they'll do it so calmly, so confidently that you start questioning your own reality. And the more you question yourself, the more power they gain. Then comes blame shifting. Narcissists can't handle responsibility. To them, accountability is poison. So if something goes wrong, it's always someone else's fault, usually yours. You bring up their behavior, and suddenly the conversation flips to all the ways you've messed up. They're masters at turning defense into offense. They never sit in the hot seat because they're too busy throwing you into it. And here's what makes their game so dangerous: it's not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's the silent treatment when you don't give them what they want. It's withholding affection until you bend to their control. It's subtle digs disguised as jokes. It's backhanded compliments that eat away at your confidence over time. And before you know it, you're doubting your own worth, apologizing for things you didn't do, and shrinking yourself just to keep the peace. But the peace never lasts because peace isn't what they're after. They need tension, they need drama, they need to keep you unsteady, because an unsteady person is easier to control. That's the game: confusion, doubt, and dependency. They want you second-guessing everything so you'll depend on them for clarity. Now, here's the piece most people miss. Narcissists aren't driven by strength, they're driven by insecurity. Underneath the ego, the arrogance, the manipulation is fear. Fear of being ordinary, fear of being exposed, fear of being powerless. Their game is a mask, and the mask has to stay on no matter the cost. That's why they fight so hard to control the narrative, because without the game, without the manipulation, they don't have an identity. So when you're dealing with a narcissist, you can't think in terms of fairness. You can't expect honesty or reason or accountability. Their game isn't built on those rules. Their game is built on domination, and they'll play it with charm, with silence, with blame, or with rage, whatever it takes to keep the upper hand. Most of us, when we see injustice, when we feel wronged, our natural instinct is to fight back, to confront, to defend ourselves. We want to set the record straight. We want to look the manipulator in the eye and say, no, that's not true. Here are the facts. Here's the proof. Here's why you're wrong. And for most people, that works. For most people, truth has weight, logic has power, accountability matters. But with a narcissist, that strategy backfires every single time. Here's why. A narcissist isn't searching for truth. They're not sitting there waiting to be corrected, waiting to have the evidence laid out in front of them so they can nod and say, oh, you're right, I see now. That will never happen. Because the moment you confront them, the moment you challenge their story, you've stepped right onto their battlefield. And on their battlefield, the rules are rigged. Think about it. What happens when you argue with a narcissist? The conversation doesn't go straight. It zigzags. You say one thing, they twist it. You present proof, they deny it. You bring up the past, they say you're living in history. You talk about the future, they say you're impossible to please. It's like quicksand. The more you push, the deeper you sink. And here's the dangerous part: confrontation fuels them. It doesn't shut them down, it energizes them. A narcissist feeds on drama. They crave it. Every heated word, every raised voice, every ounce of your frustration, it's fuel for their ego. Because now, they're in control of your emotions. You're not calm anymore. You're not steady. you're reacting. And that reaction tells them, I've got them. I've pulled the strings and they moved. See, confrontation assumes that the other person cares about resolution. But a narcissist doesn't care about resolution. They care about domination. And when you go head to head with them, they don't think, how do I make this right? They think, how do I win? Winning doesn't mean truth. Winning doesn't mean fairness. Winning means leaving you more exhausted, more confused, and more defeated than when you started. Another reason confrontation doesn't work is because narcissists are masters of deflection. You come in with your list of concerns, your evidence, your carefully chosen words, and within 5 minutes, the spotlight is off of them and shining right back at you. Suddenly, you're the one under interrogation. You're defending your tone, your timing, your memory. You're apologizing for interrupting, for bringing it up the wrong way, for not being patient enough. They spin the table so fast that you forget why you even started the conversation in the first place. And let's be honest, that's exhausting. That's why people stay quiet. That's why people walk on eggshells around narcissists. Because you learn real quick that no matter how carefully you pick your words, no matter how respectfully you try to bring it up, the moment you confront them, you're in a no-win situation. It's also important to understand that confrontation threatens their identity. A narcissist builds their entire self-image on being superior, being untouchable, being admired. So when you confront them, you're not just challenging their words, you're threatening their entire mask. And what happens when you threaten the mask? They fight harder, they double down, they get louder, colder, crueler. They pull out every weapon they have because the mask can't slip, not even for a second. And this is where so many people get trapped. You think, if I can just explain it better, if I can just find the right words, if I can just stay calm enough, maybe they'll finally hear me. But the truth is, they're not listening for clarity. They're listening for ammunition. Every word you say becomes another tool they can use against you. They remember your slip-ups, not your logic. They remember your tone, not your point. They'll weaponize the exact words you thought would save you. So, confrontation doesn't just fail to work, it actually strengthens their position. Because by confronting them directly, you've given them the stage. You've entered their arena. And once you're in their arena, you're playing their game by their rules under their spotlight. And the house always wins. So if arguing doesn't work, if proving them wrong doesn't work, if confrontation only makes things worse, then what do? How do you stop playing their game without losing yourself in silence? That's where the secret weapon comes in. And it's not a fight, it's not a debate, it's not a long explanation. It's one question, just one. And it's so simple that at first you might think, that can't possibly work. But it does, because it goes straight to the heart of the problem. The question is this: what would a healthy person do in this situation? Now, let's talk about why this works. Because on the surface, it doesn't sound like a hammer. It doesn't sound like an attack. It doesn't even sound like a comeback. But that's the power of it. It's calm. It's clear. It's undeniable. It takes the entire game they're playing and flips the script. When you ask a narcissist that question, you're not attacking them directly. You're not calling them names. You're not labeling them a narcissist. You're not even telling them they're wrong. You're creating a mirror they can't escape from. Because suddenly, it's not about you versus them, it's about them versus the standard of healthy behavior. And deep down, even they know they don't measure up. Think about it. Narcissists thrive in fog. They want confusion. They want arguments that go in circles. They want to keep you chasing your own tail until you're too tired to fight back. But this question cuts through the fog like a spotlight. There's no circle. There's no loophole. It forces the conversation into a place they can't control: comparison to healthy behavior. And here's the beauty of it. You don't even have to explain what healthy means. Everyone knows, deep down we all know, a healthy person listens. A healthy person takes responsibility. A healthy person apologizes when they've hurt someone. A healthy person doesn't need to dominate, doesn't need to belittle, doesn't need to twist your words. So the moment you ask that question, you've drawn a line in the sand, not aggressively, not emotionally, just firmly with clarity. What happens next? Well, usually one of two things. Either they get angry because they know they can't win against that question, and so they lash out to cover their exposure. Or they get quiet because you've hit the nerve. Either way, they're exposed. Not because you shouted louder, but because you asked smarter. And let's be clear, you're not asking this question for their transformation. You're not asking because you expect them to suddenly wake up and say, "You're right, I'll change." That's not the goal. The goal is to take back your power. The goal is to remind yourself of what healthy looks like, so you don't get dragged into their storm. Because when you say it out loud, it snaps you back into reality. It reminds you, wait a second, I'm not crazy. This isn't how healthy people act. This isn't how healthy love feels. This isn't what healthy communication looks like. It's also a safeguard. Because when a narcissist tries to twist things, When they try to gaslight you into doubting yourself, this question becomes your anchor. It's short, it's sharp, it's easy to remember in the heat of the moment. And the moment it leaves your lips, it shifts the power dynamic. Suddenly, you're not defending yourself, you're not chasing their approval, you're simply holding up a standard and asking if they can meet it. And let me tell you, most of the time, they can't. That's why it stings. That's why they scramble. That's why they either blow up or go silent. Because that question leaves no room for their tricks. It's not emotional, so they can't accuse you of being too sensitive. It's not aggressive, so they can't say you're attacking them. It's not complicated, so they can't twist the meaning. It's clean. It's clear. It's inescapable. That's why I call it the secret weapon. Not because it destroys them, but because it protects you. Not because it wins the argument, but because it ends the argument. One simple line that pulls the mask right off without you ever having to raise your voice. The reason this question works isn't because it's clever. It's not about tricking the narcissist. It's not about outsmarting them in a chess match. It works because it shifts the entire dynamic of the conversation. It takes the power out of their hands and places it into a space they can't control. And for a narcissist, that's terrifying. When you ask, what would a healthy person do in this situation? You're doing something very few people ever do with them. You're refusing to play by their rules. Think about it. Narcissists spend their lives training people to react, to defend themselves, to argue, to raise their voices, to prove their innocence. That's the arena they own. They know how to twist words, how to spin stories, how to create enough smoke that nobody can see clearly. That's their playground. But your question takes the fight off their turf and moves it into neutral ground where smoke and mirrors don't work. This works because it forces them, even if only for a moment, to see themselves against a standard outside of their control. Normally, they're the ones defining the rules. They decide what's right, what's wrong, what you did, what you didn't do. They hold the script, but now you're pulling out a universal script, one they didn't write. And that script is health, decency, accountability. Everyone knows it, everyone recognizes it, and deep down they know they don't live up to it. What makes this so powerful is that it's not an attack, it's a mirror. You're not shouting, "You're wrong." You're not labeling them, "You're narcissist." You're simply holding up a reflection and asking them to compare. And comparison, for someone who spends their whole life pretending to be superior, is their kryptonite. Because if there's one thing they don't want, it's to be measured. They thrive in the gray area where nothing is certain. But your question turns the gray into black and white. Another reason this question works is because it disarms their favorite weapon, deflection. Normally, when you bring up a problem, they deflect it back onto you. They say you're too sensitive. They say you're misremembering. They say you're overreacting. But when you ask what a healthy person would do, where can they deflect that? If they say, a healthy person would do exactly what I'm doing, they reveal the absurdity of their behavior. If they say, I don't know, they've admitted weakness. If they get angry, they've exposed the fact that the question hit a nerve. No matter what direction they take, the mask slips. And here's the deeper layer. This question doesn't just work on them, it works on you. Because in the middle of an argument, in the middle of manipulation, it's easy to lose your footing. It's easy to get tangled in their web and forget what healthy even looks like. That's the danger of dealing with a narcissist. Over time, their chaos becomes your normal. But when you ask that question, you're reminding yourself of the truth. You're pulling yourself back to solid ground. You're saying out loud, I know what healthy behavior looks like. I haven't forgotten, and I'm not going to pretend this is normal. It also works because it's calm. Narcissists are experts at provoking emotion. They want you flustered, they want you shouting, they want you unraveling, because then they can point at your reaction and say, see, you're the problem. But this question robs them of that ammunition. It's not shouted in anger, it's spoken in clarity. And clarity is the one thing they can't handle, because clarity doesn't bend to their tricks. And let's not overlook the simplicity. It's short, it's plain, it doesn't need explanation. That's what makes it powerful. You don't have to memorize a script, you don't have to carry evidence. You don't have to prepare a defense. It's one sentence and it cuts deeper than any long speech ever could. So why does this question work? Because it changes the arena, it holds up a mirror, it blocks deflection, it anchors you in truth, and it strips them of their favorite weapon, confusion. It leaves them with no safe move to make. And when a narcissist has no safe move, their mask begins to crack. It's one thing to hear about this question in theory, but it's another to actually picture yourself using it in real life. Because let's be honest, when you're face to face with a narcissist, your emotions are running high. You're frustrated, you're confused, you're tired of the games. In those moments, it's hard to stay calm. So let's walk through what this actually looks like step by step so you can see the difference it makes. Imagine you're in an argument with a narcissist. Maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's even a family member. You bring up something that's been bothering you. Let's say they've been ignoring your boundaries, not respecting your time, showing up late, dismissing your feelings. You start explaining it, hoping they'll understand. But before you even finish your sentence, they jump in. They say something like, "You're too sensitive, you always make a big deal out of nothing. Why can't you just let things go?" And immediately you feel that sting because they've shifted it. Suddenly the conversation isn't about their behavior, it's about you being too sensitive. You feel the urge to defend yourself, to explain why your feelings are valid, to prove that you're not overreacting. That's the trap. That's the game. Now here's where the shift happens. Instead of falling into that pattern, instead of defending or escalating, you take a breath and you calmly ask, what would a healthy person do in this situation? The room changes, the energy changes, because now they don't get to keep you in the fog. You've cut through it. You haven't called them a name. You haven't raised your voice. You've simply placed a standard in the middle of the room and you've asked them to measure up to it. Picture their reaction. They might roll their eyes. They might laugh it off. They might even get angry because you've cornered them in a way they're not used to. But what they can't do is twist it back on you. If they say, a healthy person would let it go, that exposes their lack of accountability. If they stay silent, the silence speaks louder than words. And if they explode, well, that only proves the point. Either way, the mask slips. Let's take another example. Say you're at work. You're dealing with a boss who constantly takes credit for your ideas. You finally bring it up and they shoot back. You should just be grateful you even have this job. Do you know how many people would kill to be in your position? Now you're stuck. You want to argue, to point out your contributions, to prove your worth. But instead you stop and you say, what would a healthy person do in this situation? In that moment, you've stripped away the intimidation. You've taken the focus off their authority and put it on behavior. You've called out the imbalance without being disrespectful. And now, they're the one under the spotlight, not you. Or think about family. Narcissism in families is tough because it's tangled with history, with loyalty, with obligation. Maybe it's a parent who constantly criticizes, who finds a way to make you feel small no matter what you do. You push back and they say, I'm your parent. You owe me respect. Instead of spiraling into guilt or defending yourself, you ask, what would a healthy person do in this situation? Now, you're not dishonoring them. You're not shouting. You're not disrespecting. You're simply laying down a truth that stands on its own. A healthy parent doesn't guilt-trip their child. A healthy parent doesn't weaponize respect. The question makes that clear without you ever having to argue it. That's the beauty of this approach. It's not about memorizing a speech. It's not about preparing for every possible comeback. It's about having one tool, one line that you can pull out in any situation. Romantic, professional, family, it doesn't matter. Because the question works the same way every time. It takes you out of defense mode, it shifts the balance of power, and it forces the narcissist into a space where their usual tricks don't work. And here's the most important part: when you use it, you stay calm. You're not delivering it like a jab. You're not throwing it like an accusation. You're saying it with composure, almost like you're asking it out loud for yourself as much as for them. Because when you do, you anchor yourself in truth. You remind yourself of what healthy looks like. Once you remember that, it becomes a lot harder for them to drag you back into the chaos. Final empowerment. Here's what you need to remember when it comes to dealing with a narcissist. The win isn't in making them admit they're wrong. The win isn't in getting the apology you deserve. The win isn't even in changing their behavior, because most of the time they won't change. The real victory is in protecting your peace and reclaiming your power, and that's what this question gives you. It's not just a line you throw out to expose them. It's a tool that shifts the way you operate in the relationship. When you ask, what would a healthy person do in this situation? You're doing more than holding them accountable. You're giving yourself permission to step out of the cycle. Because let's be real, the cycle with a narcissist is exhausting. They charm, they manipulate, they gaslight, they blame, and then right when you're ready to walk away, they throw you just enough crumbs of attention to pull you back in. That cycle can go on for years. It can drain your energy, crush your confidence, and make you forget who you were before they came into your life. But every time you use this question, you're cutting a hole in that cycle. You're reminding yourself, I don't have to play this game. I know what healthy looks like, and I have the right to expect it. And that's powerful. Because one of the biggest lies a narcissist will sell you is that you're the problem. They'll convince you that if you were calmer, more patient, less sensitive, more forgiving, things would be better. But the truth is, you could twist yourself into 1,000 different versions of who they want you to be, and it would still never be enough. Because the problem isn't you. The problem is their need to control. And when you use this question, you stop buying that lie. You stop carrying the weight of their flaws on your shoulders. Another layer of empowerment is that this question helps you separate the person from the mask. Because when you're in deep with a narcissist, the mask can be convincing. They can seem charming, confident, even loving at times. But when you ask what a healthy person would do, the contrast becomes crystal clear. A healthy partner doesn't manipulate. A healthy boss doesn't belittle. A healthy parent doesn't guilt trip. You stop confusing their mask with reality, and that clarity gives you strength. And let's talk about dignity. Narcissists thrive on stealing it from you. They want you to break down, to cry, to shout, to spiral, because the moment you lose control, they win. But when you use this question, you stay centered, you stay calm, you stay grounded in truth, and that protects your dignity. No matter how chaotic the conversation gets, you walk away with your head high, knowing you didn't let them pull you into the mud. This is the kind of empowerment that lasts, because it's not about having power over them. It's about having power over yourself. It's about choosing clarity over confusion, calm over chaos, and self-respect over endless arguments. That's why this question matters so much. It's not just a way to expose the narcissist, it's a way to strengthen you. It's a reminder that you always have a choice. You can't control how they act, but you can control how you respond. And sometimes, that's all the control you need. And here's something important to realize: the more you practice asking this question, the less you'll even need to say it out loud. Over time, it becomes an internal compass. You'll start noticing red flags sooner. You'll spot manipulation faster. You'll recognize when something doesn't feel healthy, and instead of getting sucked into the spiral, you'll step back with clarity. You'll feel stronger, steadier, harder to shake, because now you're not waiting for them to validate you. You're validating yourself by holding everything against the standard of health. This isn't just about surviving a conversation with a narcissist. It's about reclaiming your voice, your confidence, your peace of mind. It's about remembering that you're not powerless in this dynamic. The truth is, you've always had the power. You just needed a way to access it. And one question, as simple as it seems, is the doorway back to that strength. At the end of the day, exposing a narcissist isn't about beating them at their own game. It's not about forcing them to admit the truth or finally handing you the apology you've been waiting for. It's about something much bigger. It's about reclaiming your power, your peace, and your dignity. That one question, what would a healthy person do in this situation, isn't just a clever trick, it's a mirror that reflects the truth of their behavior and shows you the difference between manipulation and maturity, between control and care, between abuse and respect. It shines a light in the dark corners where gaslighting and blame thrive. And more importantly, it gives you a standard, a compass, a way to anchor yourself when the storm of their chaos tries to pull you under. When you use this question, you're not just exposing the narcissist to themselves, you're exposing the truth to yourself. You're drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is what health looks like. This is what I deserve. And anything less is not enough for me. That's where the real freedom begins. Because the more you practice it, the less tangled you'll feel in their games. The more confident you'll become in spotting the difference between love and control. And the stronger you'll stand in conversations where they once held all the power. So remember, your worth isn't up for debate. Your voice isn't a toy for someone else to twist. Your peace isn't something you have to sacrifice to keep another person comfortable. You have the right to expect healthy behavior. You have the right to stand tall in the truth. And you have the right to walk away from anything that doesn't meet that standard. Don't waste your energy trying to fix someone who doesn't want to change. Invest your energy into protecting the one person who truly matters in this equation, yourself. That's where strength lives, that's where peace grows. And that's where your power will always remain. Because in the end, the question isn't just about exposing them. It's about reminding you of the healthiest answer of all: you deserve better, and you are strong enough to choose it.